during your peak, how much did you take?
I used 1,000 milligrams of like some sort of testosterone every week. Probably we would use like 300 milligrams of equipoise. We would do like 400 milligrams of DECA. And then I would do some growth hormone with that. And usually, like I said, I know people don't believe it, but the GH was really good back then. It was usually Humatrope. And we were using 3 IUs a day. I created Species Nutrition with one mission in mind: to provide bodybuilders and serious athletes with no-nonsense supplements that work. I put my name and reputation on every bottle of Species Nutrition products. If you want to be your absolute best, join the evolution.
Hey, this is the Game Triple H from the WWE. You're watching RxMuscle.com, the truth in bodybuilding.
RX Television on RxMuscle.com. This is Ask Dave, your 30-minute question and answer show with Dave Palumbo. I'm your host, Adi Faruqi. So thankful you could join us today. Before we get to the questions, we just are about to, well, by the time this episode goes live, the sale will be live. We're having a post-workout sale at speciesnutrition.com. 2 of our products, one an ISOLYZE, one a CARBOLYZE. So CARBOLYZE Unflavored for $19.99. Chocolate peanut butter ISOLYZE, 22 servings, $19.99. That's more than 50% off both products. So essentially, you're getting your post-workout shake for $40. Both products will expire at the end of March. Full disclaimer. In addition to that, so in addition to over 50% off CARBOLYZE Unflavored and chocolate peanut butter ISOLYZE 22 servings, we are having 25% off store-wide through the end of the week. That's not fully determined whether or not it's going to be while supplies last or pretty much through Sunday night, but you're going to get 25% off using promo code PW25. That's post-workout 25. Dave, if you want to maybe just elaborate a little bit more on, I know we've talked about this in the past, about, Species products that you recommend for post-workout nutrition.
I just got back from the gym and I made my typical post-workout shake, which is, I love chocolate and I love vanilla peanut butter. Those are 2 of my favorites. So I put my chocolate peanut butter, 2 scoops, actually a scoop and a half I used. I'm not as hardcore as I used to be. And I put 1 scoop of unflavored CARBOLYZE, so it didn't change the taste at all. You can't even tell it's in there. And I mixed it with a spoon. This was not even used. I didn't use a blender at all. That's how well both of these products mix, because they're so pure. And you can see I only have it in about maybe 6 ounces of fluid here. Not even, probably 4. It mixes that easily. And it's so creamy. I'm telling you, the chocolate peanut butter is it goes through waves. It's funny because at one point it was our most popular, and then it kind of died off a little bit because we came out with pumpkin spice and coffee, and then people were buying those. I'm telling you, when you guys are going to try this now, because for $19.99, we're pretty much giving it away at cost right now because we have some short dated product, and it's while supplies last. So I don't want to hear anyone crying to me, on Saturday and telling me the sale's still on it. And I'm like, well, we're out. When we run out, when the inventory runs out, that's it. The chocolate peanut butter and or the CARBOLYZE will be done. You'll still get 25% off till Sunday, but you're not going to have those opportunity to get those at $19.99. They're normally $52 on the site. So you guys have to act quickly on these. And the reason I do these sales is to give people the opportunity who maybe can't afford it or don't have the extra cash to be able to buy product at a cheaper rate, because I won't be able to sell it at the end of March. Does the stuff go bad? Of course not. I just can't sell it after the expiration date legally. So you guys have the ability to get ISOLYZE and CARBOLYZE at a much greatly reduced price. And you know what? If you already just bought it last week, don't worry about it. Buy more. Put it in your cabinet. You have it. The stuff. To be honest, I opened a cherry vanilla. We used to have cherry vanilla. Said I found a container in my closet. Probably was there for 10 years.
I was going to ask, how many layers of dust were on that container?
No, it was sealed. I opened it up. I said, you know what? Because the whey doesn't go bad. What happens is when these things, sometimes the flavoring system will break down over time. It was 10 years or 8 years expired, and it tasted just like the day I made it. And it was delicious. So the stuff, as long as it's kept in a dry place and it's not too hot, or, the stuff is not going to go bad. So here's your opportunity. Don't say I don't love you guys. It is my birthday month. We will have a birthday sale for Dave Palumbo on February 17th, and we will have a Valentine's Day sale too. But this is a really good one. So check it out. Post-workout, you get home, ISOLYZE, CARBOLYZE right after you train. Sometimes I actually bring it to the gym with me in a shaker cup, and I add water, and I shake it up and drink it down right there. I'm telling you, you're going to be amazed at how easy this stuff mixes. You could literally, people tell me, oh, I can't drink so much fluid. You could put it in 4 ounces and gulp it down. There's no excuse why you're not getting your protein when you get out of that gym.
And again, you, Ask Dave viewers, are the first to be exposed to this sale. So act now, right now at speciesnutrition.com, PW25 for 25% off. And then, of course, CARBOLYZE Unflavored for $19.99, chocolate peanut butter, ISOLYZE, 22 servings, $19.99. While
my daughter Aria is drinking it right now. I made her one. She was like, holy, this is good, because she's home from school. She's sick. And she loves it. She's like, wants more. I'm like, all right, enough. You just drank 30 grams of protein. You're 4 years old, 5 years old. You don't need that much,
I mean, look, if you're a fan of Reese's peanut butter cups like I am, this is right up your alley. It's like I said, like I've said for the longest time, when it comes to flavoring systems, I mean, that's something that we have absolutely on lock. So again, take advantage right now, speciesnutrition.com. Let's go to the questions. The first 2 questions on this show from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. First question, what do you do to reduce cortisol when you have a problem losing weight, no matter how hard one diet? So targeting cortisol specifically.
Here's my problem with cortisol. Too many people think they have adrenal fatigue and they don't lose weight because of cortisol. And you know what? It's usually condiments. Very rarely do I find a person who perfectly follows the diet, who does everything they're supposed to do, who doesn't add extra doohickeys here and there, who doesn't snack, who doesn't lose weight. Very, very infrequently. Now, there are people who overproduce insulin, who have poor insulin sensitivity, and for some reason, it makes their body a little resistant to losing weight because they got too much insulin around. A lot of people have seen good results with Ozempic. Those are the people I've talked about that drug before, where it helps blood sugar control, it helps with appetite and stuff like that. But usually, okay, it's not a cortisol issue. Now, if you don't sleep and you sleep 3 hours a night, okay, and you're stressed out of your mind because you're working 2 jobs, you're trying to get to the gym and you have 3 kids to take care of, yeah, you might have high cortisol. In that situation, I agree with you. And in which case, the only way to reduce it would be to get more sleep and reduce some of that stress. There's nothing you could take, okay, that's going to reduce cortisol. And you certainly don't want to take a drug like aminoglutathione, okay, which is a cortisol inhibitor, because it not only does it inhibit cortisol, it inhibits every steroidal hormone in the body, which is so too many side effects to that, including clotting factors that inhibit. So you can't do that. The only way to really legitimately lower high cortisol, if that really is your problem, which most of the time it's not, is to get more sleep and to try to rest a little bit more. Now, some people also overtrain. I know these people, they never take a day off. They're at the gym 7 days a week. They weight train every day. They do cardio every day, and they're just overworked. And that can raise cortisol levels. It really, more than likely, it's going to exhaust neurotransmitters in the body, and it's going to cause what we call the overtraining syndrome, which is a real syndrome because it's the exhaustion of neurotransmitters in the brain and in the body. So if the nerves can't communicate with the muscles and tell them what to do because there's no neurotransmitters to help them communicate, you get fatigue and your body just doesn't respond. But like I said, more than likely, and I've been doing this a very, very long time now. I hate to be the guy who, I never thought I would be the guy to say, yeah, I've been doing this for 30 years, but I've been doing this for 30 years. And 99 times out of 100, it's usually someone doing something wrong with their diet, which is why they're not losing weight. Now, there are other, people who don't get good muscle gains or improvements in the gym. that could be due to exercise form and other stuff like that. But as far as not losing body fat, it's usually diet, connected.
Second question, again from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. Thoughts on women taking IGF-1?
It seems like we get this question an awful lot, Sid. People are really obsessed with this question. And, growth hormone, when you take that as a, I guess you could say, a supplement, it causes two things in the body to happen. Number one, it causes the fat cells to mobilize free fatty acids out of the fat cells, and your body uses that for fuel. That's what GH does. Directly, indirectly, the GH will go to the liver, and the liver will release IGF-1 in response to the growth hormone that you take. And then IGF-1 can then rebuild muscle tissue. It can cause stem cells to turn into new muscle fibers. It can do a whole host of different things in the body. The problem, for women taking GH, there's no side effects because there's nothing androgenic to it. There's no male hormone related, side effects because it's not a male hormone. It's a protein hormone that both men and women produce. When you take direct IGF-1, assuming you're taking real IGF-1, which on today's market is a crapshoot at best. If you take too much growth aspect of the equation, right? Because the GH is more of a fat burner and growth agent, whereas the IGF-1 is just the growth component. A lot of times, because people take too much, they start to get side effects from it. And the side effects they get for men really is not a big deal, because if your nose and your ears get a little bigger and your facial bones get a little more pronounced, then not a big deal, right? For women, it kind of can masculinize them a little bit. Not in the masculinization you get from testosterone that thickens the jawline and deepens the voice, but it kind of gives just like a more Neanderthalish look to a woman's face, and that doesn't look appealing. So I don't think women really need IGF-1, to be honest with you. And I don't really, like I said, I don't really think the IGF-1 on the market is really good anyway. I'd rather see them use an IU and a half per day of GH. And this way they'll get the fat burning effects of it and the muscle building effects of it and muscle repair effects of it. I think that's a better way to go. These two questions were from the Dave Palumbo Experience app, which is my app that I offer from the App Store, whether it be iTunes or Android, depending on what phone you have. It's $29 a month. You get me as your coach in your back pocket. You get access to all my writings, all my videos I've done on everything, right in one place. We put my workouts up. We put up a workout every single week up there. All my diets are up there, off-season pre-contest. There's a lot of great information. Plus, I answer everyone's questions that they put on there. If you're an app member, you can ask me a question, and I'll answer it in an open forum so that everyone sees everyone's questions and everyone's answers. And I also do a Q&A video every single week just for the app members. So it's a lot of learning and information. It's like having a constant teacher in your back pocket. And if you have questions, you always have the ability for me to answer them. It's a great value. Like I said, for $29 a month, you cannot go wrong. It's a great gift to buy for people as well. Check it out once again at your Android or iTunes store.
Let's go to our Instagram questions. Again, if you're not already following us on Instagram, the handle is official_RxMuscle. If you're watching us here on YouTube for the first time, we welcome you. We ask that you subscribe below, hit the notification bell. You're not going to miss any of our show segments, updates. Obviously, yesterday's episode of After Hours, really a full complex discussion of the passing of Leo from Leo and Longevity. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot more discussion based off what, I guess is circulating out of Thailand, but obviously an unfortunate situation, but a very complex and nuanced conversation. So again, if you haven't already seen that, After Hours live on the channel. And then of course, Sunday night's live episode of Heavy Muscle Radio with Dave and Chris Aceto. Over the weekend, we released the new episode of the new show, Rips and Rants, Dave Palumbo and John Romano, now settling into the new name, the new show, 4 or 5 episodes deep on that one. So again, and then of course, tomorrow, all new episode of Iron Ray. So again, subscribe below, hit the notification bell. If you like what you're watching, hit the like button, comment below. And as always, we appreciate your support. Let's go to Carlos Fit NYC. Dorian Yates posted recently on his Instagram, posted a picture of himself at the Mr. Olympia press conference, said that the conference, he didn't enjoy being part of it, felt it was a bit pointless as it disrupted his prep schedule. He was so focused on his goal, and that was almost a distraction. I'm going to go to, okay, so I guess his point was to talk about the press conference being quote unquote pointless and how it is done. Dave, I know you and I spoke. So after Olympia, the Saturday night show, on Sunday, they have what's called the Superstar Seminar. So Dan Solomon, Chief Olympia Officer, gave his remarks, and he was very forthright, very upfront that he was not happy, I guess, with the recent reiteration of the press conference. And he said, look, it's tough to expect, the world's best bodybuilders, low carbs, at the final stretch of their prep, that we're, expecting them to put on a show, to be entertaining, to be hilarious. So that he was going to, really rethink, perhaps recalibrate, what kind of an event that will be pre-Olympia weekend with the press conference. If you had to advise Dan Solomon on what you would like to see for the press conference, what would it be?
Well, I've said this before, but the press conference is called the press conference because the press is supposed to be asking the questions. That's always been what a press conference was. You get the top athletes or whatever. If you're having a boxing match, the two fighters, and you put them up on in front of everyone, and the press, the people who cover the event, ask the questions like RxMuscle, Muscle Development. Who's ever there from whatever website. I don't know who the latest websites who cover the Olympia are, Muscle Insider. And we ask questions because we're going to sit down and we're going to think of the questions we want to ask before we get there. So they're going to be interesting questions. And I'm not going to ask the guy who's going to come in 12th place a question. So I don't need him up there. I need the top 10 Olympia guys up there. Probably the top 6 would be better. But you put the top 10 up there, sitting up there on a panel. And Dorian, as Mr. Olympia, had the onus of having to go up there because that's part of the process. The fans are spending a lot of money on a VIP ticket. They deserve to have access to the athletes, not only to meet the athletes Thursday night, but also at a press conference so they can hear their stars talking, because on stage, no one's doing any talking. So that's the only time they're going to really see these guys in person up close talking to the world. And it's also good for the athletes to give them a chance to kind of showcase what they want to showcase. And the press should be asking questions. You should give me 3 questions. You should give that news agency 3 questions. Everyone gets 3 questions. And then we go around the room. This one. And that's it. Bob and you act as the MC and the announcer. And that's how it runs. Bob should not be running the press conference in the sense he shouldn't be asking the questions. He should just be running the press conference in terms of bringing the microphone, maybe have a follow-up question to, something that the press asked. That's how it should be done. And it'll be quicker that way. 45 minutes in and out. It's only the top athletes. It's exciting because we're only hearing what we want to hear from the top guys. And that's the way to do it. It should not be this long, laborious, boring thing where you have to involve every single person. These guys should not be standing. Okay, they're tired. Get them a nice, comfortable little platform like they used to do back in the Orleans hotel there. That was the best part, by the way, of having that. The Orleans little press conference area was really nice. I got to admit. So it was set up well. It was a very intimate setting there. But that's how it should be done. Press ask the questions, get them out.
Let's go to Nico Cantemir. Going back to your career, early parts of your career, because I think a lot of bodybuilders, actually, no, I'm wrong about this because there's a lot more information online. So, but you having to learn kind of on the run, on the go, how did you learn about, your diet, the training, the gear? Was it trial and error on your own with your own experiences? Obviously, you kind of had the unique factor of having, a medical background. I guess before you got with a coach, before you got with an advisor, what was the process for you having to go through that with all the trial and error concern?
Yeah, like anyone, I was reading the magazines, and so I kind of was trying to follow, what they were saying in terms of eating small meals throughout the day. But when I started contest dieting for the first time, I didn't really know what I was doing that well. And I had a guy by the name of Vinny Carvelli who worked at this gym that I was personal training some people at over this one summer. And he helped me with the first show. And, he put me on that 5 meals a day, and he was, it was like the old 80s bodybuilding diet. It was very low fat. It was high protein. The carbs would be varied a little bit. Then when I really did my, one of the first shows that I guess I felt like I actually looked pretty good at the first show I was like 168 pounds, shredded, but I had only been training like 6 or 8 months. And the second show I was 200 pounds at, and that show Peter Neff helped me for that. And Peter Neff was a disciple of Bob Grushkin. So I was basically being trained in the Grushkin way of eating, which is what Chris Aceto does. And then when I did my next set of shows, like 2 years later, I was working with my friend Doug Wentz, who I was training with, who was also another Grushkin guy. And so it was the same protocol, except Peter was an all-natural guy, and I started using anabolics at that point. So my friend Doug was giving me the Grushkin anabolic stacks. And then I, over the course of the next couple of years, started incorporating my own knowledge that I had and some of the insights I was getting, and I was doing a lot of reading, and I started realizing that fats were more important. So then I turned it into my own thing. But it really was the Bob Grushkin basic structure of a diet, eating 6 times a day, sometimes shakes, sometimes meals, high protein, moderate carbs, depending on, how fast your metabolism was. Bob they weren't really big on fats in those diets. So that I kind of changed that whole concept because I found that I was having trouble growing with no fats, and because no one ate fats in the 80s and 90s. They just didn't do it. They thought it was real. I remember Lee Haney writing an article once about that he would eat 1 yolk with his breakfast, and everyone's like, a yolk? What do we need that for? What is he, crazy? And he knew intuitively that he looked better when he ate some fat in his diet. He even said it. And so that kind of always stuck with me. And then, I just realized that it's like whenever I would eat a fatty meal, I would always look better the next day. And everyone would, you'd have pizza the day after a show and everyone would look great. I'm like, something's got to, there's something to it. And I've told the story about the cheeseburgers I ate and I looked really good. So I'm not going to rehash that. But so it kind of evolved. And then I started experimenting with myself, and I noticed that I grew better when I was on fats, and I looked better when I dieted on fats and on slightly lower carbs. And then I started using it on all my friends that I was doing their diets for free. They would come over to my house back in the 90s, and it just worked really, really well. And that's how it came about. It was the great thing about guys today is that there's actually coaches who have a lot of knowledge that they can impart to you. There wasn't really that back in the day. It was just someone in the gym helped you if you were lucky. I just happened to hook up with the right people, and I had them available to me. But I hired, Peter Neff, for my first show and paid him because I didn't know what I was doing. And that's really what you should do. So I had a coach, he wasn't for a very long time. And then my friend Doug was really helping me for free because we trained together every day. So it's important to have someone who can advise you on what the right way to eat, and to look at your body and tell you, hey, you're eating too much or you're eating too little. I remember I went to the gym once and I'm like, posing for my friend Doug. And I'm like, how do I look? He goes, what are you eating? And I told him, he's like, you're eating too much food. What do you need all that food for? I'm like, well, I'm big. And he's like, cut that shake out at night you're doing, you let your body, burn some fat. And so I thought I had strided glutes at that point, but he's like, you can be harder. I know you can. And he was right. It's just, I had to go into that suffer zone, but I needed someone to tell me that. I would have never done it myself because I looked good to myself. He was able to see me with a different set of eyes and know, hey, you know what? I know you can have better separation than this. And so he pushed me into that place that I probably would not have pushed myself at the time. So that's important. Always look for a coach that you resonate with and that you kind of get jive with and that you agree with their principles and stuff like that. That's why I have a lot of people that come to me and they say, I want you to coach me because I listen to you all the time and Ask Dave and all the shows you do. And I like the science aspect of what you're doing and that you break everything down very mechanistically and that you have reasons behind everything you do. And those people work great with me.
Let's go to B Winery. I have a ton of pain in my right elbow, mainly when I'm working triceps. Other than ice, rest, anything you recommend to help recover as I start show prep in 3 weeks and want to be at least close to 100%?
Yeah. You know what the funny thing is, once you'll start show prep, you'll lose a lot of water weight and drop some body fat and all your pain will go away. It happens all the time to me, whenever I would be off season really big and carrying on a lot of weight and pushing like super crazy heavy weight. And then I would have like a little nagging injury and then all of a sudden I'd start dieting and it would disappear. So more than likely that's what will happen. A lot of times elbow pain is referred pain from the shoulder. So there's something not right with the shoulder. Maybe your rotator cuff is a little weak. It's not stabilizing your shoulder correctly. So then the elbow is being tweaked in the wrong plane of motion and you're getting some pain. ART therapy, active release techniques therapy, works really well because it targets that whole chain. They'll work the whole chain along the arm from the shoulder down to your fingers. And it'll release any kind of scar tissue in here. And that usually frees up that tendon. Because the reason you get elbow pain, and you think about it, the elbow is halfway between your hand and your shoulder, right? This is the middle portion. So this always takes the brunt of this. There's a problem here, or if there's a problem here. And so if this chain is not flowing properly when you move your arm like this, and there's something sticking, it's gonna take this tendon that's in this groove here, and it's gonna rub it against there, and you're gonna get tendonitis. So the only way to stop that, you can take all the anti-inflammatories you want, but it's not gonna cure the problem. You got to get either a good deep tissue massage, or like I said, ART is better because it targets scar tissue specifically. They'll find it, and they actually have you move your arm through its range of motion while they're stripping away that scar tissue. And that usually fixes the problem pretty immediately. You know, it might only take 1 or 2 treatments to do that. So I, highly recommend you seek someone out who does ART, and you can go to activereleasetechniques.com and put your zip code, and you can find people in your area, that are certified, really certified. Because some people say they're certified in, but they really aren't. You want someone who's taken the course from Dr. Leahy and is really certified in it. And I think you'll find good relief with that.
King T1G Muscle, thoughts on hexadrone?
I don't even know what it is. Being honest, I don't know that much about it, to be honest. I don't want to say it sucks or it's great, because I don't really know enough about it.
All right, I'll move on to another question. All right. I've heard it pronounced as Yohimbine and Yohimbine. Which one do we go by?
I think either one's acceptable.
All right, so let's go with Yohimbine. Thoughts on Yohimbine on prep?
We used to use Yohimbine back in the day. It was originally prescribed for people who had erection problems. Like, that was the first Viagra. It didn't really work that well, and we all thought it raised testosterone levels. That was always what it was sold for, right? So I remember before I ever took anabolics, my doctor friend wrote a prescription for Yohimbine for us. We all were taking Yohimbine, thinking we were going to, have higher testosterone level from it and grow. And you know what? I did notice a little bit of a pump from it. And I think I think it works because it actually raises the hormone, antidiuretic hormone, or vasopressin. It raises that in the pituitary, which causes more fluid retention, really is what anti-diuretic. So it does the opposite of diuretic. It makes you retain fluid. So it's really not good to use the last 2 weeks before a show. Now, it does also, it blocks alpha-2 receptors, okay, on the blood vessel walls. And so when you block alpha-2 receptors, it increases the output of norepinephrine, which is a neurotransmitter that theoretically will help burn more fat on the lower body cells. So they find that estrogen-dependent fat cells have a lot of alpha-2 receptors. When you stimulate those, for some reason, in some people, not everyone, it will release body fat in that area. Matter of fact, they even had a few for a while. Dan Duchesne had recommended that they make a cream, and you can actually rub like a Yohimbine cream on there that will actually have good penetration. It might actually be a localized fat burner. I don't think it ever really panned out to be what he speculated it would be. And I don't really know too many people who take it and actually have noticed fat burning from it. But theoretically, that's what it should do. More than likely, people notice it when they take it, they get a better pump from it, once again, because they're retaining fluid from it. So if you are taking it while you're dieting, thinking it's burning fat, and whatever, you like it, it might give you a little stimulation. You got to stop it like 2 weeks out, because you're going to get some fluid retention from it.
I know what you're going to say, but I'm going to ask it anyway. The question is from Amar himself. Best way to get better legs in your own experience, what worked for you once or twice a week? And the reason I'm putting this on your table is because, again, we've had the conversation about other body groups, body parts, and but different bodybuilders have different approaches, right? They'll have like maybe one day where they'll go heavy weights, another day they'll make it a pump day, right? You've seen so many different methods and approaches, and now with legs, because there's so much compartmentalization of training legs. But again, we go back to the debate, once or twice a week as it applies to legs, in your opinion.
I'm going to give you a two-tiered answer. If you train legs once a week on a regular basis, okay, and you train them really hard, you probably won't want to train them more than once a week. But if you were to throw an extra like leg day in there, say every 6 weeks, you probably would get a little bit more growth out of it. Okay. But if you do legs twice a week, every single week, invariably you will burn out to the point where when you have to do the heavy day of legs, you're gonna be so miserable and hate it. You want to go into look, when I would go do legs, I wasn't looking forward to the day because I knew it was going to be a very tough day. Even though I liked to train legs because I was good at it and I was really strong. But I knew that it was gonna traumatize my nervous system. I knew it was a long workout because you have to rest between sets. But I was fresh mentally. And I knew once I got into the gym and started training, it was good. I felt I got in the groove and I felt this is awesome. And I would always train with a bunch of guys and do legs. And it was fun, after a while because everyone's pushing each other and I felt fresh. If I had done legs 2 days or 3 days earlier and then had to go in and do that heavy leg workout, there's no freaking way I would have been able to lift as heavy. I would have mentally been checked out already. I would have been like, I can't wait till this workout's over already. And I had just started. You want to be fresh, especially if it's a body part you need work on and you want to bring up. So my advice is do it once a week, but give 100% to it. That doesn't mean doing 100 sets. It means the sets that you do, make them count. Don't just, if you're on your heaviest set and you get 6 reps, you're like, yes, that's what I wanted. I wanted 6 plates for 6 reps. But you know that in the back of your head that if your training partner helps you a little, you could probably squeak out a 7th one, even though you're exhausted and you're shot and your legs really can barely hold the weight. And you tell your partner, one more, spot me. And you push through that extra one. That extra one is the one that's going to build those leg muscles bigger. And you will never do that extra one if you're doing your legs twice a week. And that's why training legs twice a week will never give you better legs in the sense of bigger legs, because you won't go that extra step.
Hitesh Balusu, I'm going to try to read this. I'm not sure if this is a Google Translate kind of a question, but the gist of it is this. So I guess the question is about protein quantity that one should consume for optimal muscle building. You've mentioned, or they've heard you mention, 2 to 2.5 grams per pound. No. The question is, will it be detrimental to kidneys in the long run? He says that he heard Jay Cutler in a recent podcast talk about how he has significantly reduced his protein intake since he's approaching his 50s. How can one consume safely without affecting kidneys in lifetime, considering natural and not taking any digestive enzymes?
First of all, I never said 2 to 2.5 grams per pound. I might have said 2 to 2.5 grams per kilogram. That's a different story. So it depends what unit you're using. Maybe, you know what I mean? Usually for maintenance and diet purposes, usually 1 gram per pound is what we say to maintain what you have. Now, if you want to grow, you need an excess of just maintenance. So you're going to need more than that. So for instance, let's say 1.5 grams of protein per pound is usually adequate for most people. So if you weigh 200 pounds, 300 grams of protein is more than enough to build muscle. Okay. Very rarely do I have to see a guy do 400 grams of protein if they weigh 200 pounds. When I was 320, I was eating about 500 grams of protein. And that was a lot. I mean, that was like pushing the envelope of my ability to handle it. It was, there was a lot of protein and I wasn't enjoying those meals, When I would diet, it was much lower, of course. I was eating probably 50 grams of protein per meal times. I was probably eating like 350 grams, just a little bit more than my requirement in case, I wasn't absorbing everything. But that should be adequate. What I find is that people who feel they need to go 2 grams and higher per pound that they weigh, it's because they're not eating enough fat. So what they're doing, and I've said this before, that they're eating extra protein to get the fat that they're not consuming in their diet. So if you eat 2 pounds of red meat at a meal when you really only need 10 ounces maybe if you're a big guy, it's because you're getting the extra fat in that meal, and that's what your body was missing. So instead of doing that, have the 10 ounces or have the 8 ounces of red meat and just add more fat to it. Have a tablespoon or 2 of macadamia oil, have a half an avocado, have half a cup of almonds with it. And that will give you what you need. So what people sometimes realize is that they have to eat an exorbitant amount of protein to grow. And it's because they're just not understanding the fact that they need to put fat into their meals, okay, with the protein and the carbs to balance the meal and to give the body what it needs. Because muscle cells are not just made of protein. All the cell membranes that surround all these cells, well, the cells are like muscle cells are long, all the cell membranes that surround the outer portion of the cell are made of fats. And when you break down muscle tissue, you're breaking down the muscle component and the fatty acid component. So you need to repair both. And so that's why it's important that you eat fat, with the protein. You can't just eat tons of protein and grow. It won't happen. And people notice that. They're like, wow, I'm eating 600 grams of carbs a day and I'm eating, 550 grams of protein and I can't gain a pound. And then I tell them, go buy some of my macadamia nut oil at Species Nutrition. And they're like, and add a tablespoon to 4 meals a day, just to show them how simplistic it is. Obviously that's kind of boring. You can do it in other ways. And they do that and all of a sudden they start gaining weight. They're like, I can't believe it. And I'll tell them to cut their protein back too. It's because the body has certain macronutrient requirements and fat is an essential nutrient that the body needs to repair tissue, okay? And if you don't take that in, you're gonna find that you have to go much higher on protein, but it's not the protein that your body is looking for, it's the fat, because with every ounce of chicken or every ounce of beef you eat, you're getting a certain amount of grams of fat with it. Now, the leaner the source of protein, like chicken breast, you're gonna have much lower fat. Just same thing, if you eat a lot of fish, much less fat. You're going to find you have to eat way, way more. I think that's why Kai Greene used to eat like 2 pounds of fish every meal, because he just wasn't getting enough fat in his diet. And until he got to that height, but that puts a tremendous strain on your body to have to deaminate all that extra protein that your body really doesn't need. So what you can do is you can eat less protein, more fat, carbs stay the same. And then what you'll notice is that your body is more efficient at using the protein, because now it's like, oh, we don't have to break down all this extra food and digest all this extra food. You don't feel full all the time. You can actually eat the food now and you actually look better. So give it a shot.
Let's go to D. Merck Cecil. Explain the science behind muscle memory. Why is it much easier for guys that used to be muscular to regain size?
It's a good question. I've answered this before, but probably not recently. We used to, I know it sounds weird, but I used to teach this all the time, that we thought muscle memory, and John Perillo kind of put forth this theory and was pushing a lot of it, that the way muscles grew is, the muscles are all surrounded by what we call a fascial sheath. Okay, like it's like a sheet of connective tissue that's very stiff. And as we grow, that sheath stretches out. And Perillo, among other people, thought that if you can do fascial stretching, like intense, nasty, painful stretching, that the muscles will grow better because their expansion was limited by this muscular sheath that surrounded them. And the theory was that if you lost muscle because you stopped training for 6 months or 8 months or a year, and then you went back to it, the reason why the muscle came back so fast was because that fascial sheath was already stretched out. Turns out that's not the truth. It sounded like a good theory, though. And I taught that for years, in my training course, because that's what everyone believed. But it turns out, and Dr. Connolly was the first one who really told me this and explained it. When you have a muscle cell, the muscle cells have multiple nuclei. The nuclei are kind of like the brains of the cells, but muscle cells are really big. So they have multiple nuclei, and each nuclei is responsible. The more nuclei you have, the bigger the cell can get, because each nuclei, controls a different portion of the cell, and muscle cells are really stretched out long. When your body takes stem cells, which we used to call satellite cells, and turns them into new muscle fibers that then fuse with the existing fibers, okay, that's called hyperplasia. And we all know that growth hormone, IGF-1, causes hyperplasia of the muscle cells, meaning that, and it's just working out in general can cause hyperplasia too, meaning that these satellite or stem cells that are undifferentiated nothing, that are just kind of hanging out around the real muscle, can turn into muscle fibers by the act of actually training and or taking these drugs that do this. When you add these new stem cells that turn into these immature muscle cells, they're small, but they all have their own nuclei, and they get fused into the existing muscle fibers. So now, let's say you train for a year, and you go from having 1 million of these nuclei, in your bicep muscle to having 1,100,000. Now I'm giving you a for instance. It's a silly example. So don't hold me to numbers. I'm just giving you a for instance. When you stop training and that muscle atrophies and shrinks down, the nuclei that are there are still the 1,100,000. You don't have 1 million anymore. You have 100,000 more. When you go back now to training that muscle at some point in the future, you have the potential to have a bigger muscle fiber because you have more nuclei there, so your body, the nuclei, which is the brain of the cell, memorizes what the cell used to look like, and that's the muscle memory. So your body will go back to where it left off because of those nuclei that are there. And that's the reason. And it makes sense when you think about it, right? I mean, you've created new tissue with new nuclei. You've changed the genetic component of what was there prior. Now that is what the body sees as normal. It will go back to that size. It won't go beyond that point. To go beyond that point, you have to really eat a lot of food. You got to train really hard. But up until your body will put back that muscle pretty quickly, what you lost. Kevin Levrone, perfect example. Sean Ray did the same thing. They wouldn't train all off season. Then they would train 16 weeks before a show. And in 6 weeks, they'd be back to where they left off. You know, they would go from nothing to everything in 6 weeks. It was the most incredible transformations I've seen. And I've seen a couple other guys do that really well too. And anyone who's ever injured themselves and had to stay out of the gym, and then they went back to the gym, and you know the muscle comes back really quickly. That muscle memory is just these nuclei that are now present.
We'll take another question from D. Merck Cecil. Again, it's a good question. I'm not sure it's one that you've addressed on this show anytime in the in past. But I do feel like it is something. It's a topic that comes up a lot, regarding training. Your thoughts on weightlifting belts? At one point, people believed that using them kept your core weak. In his belief, that's been debunked, but he doesn't see too many people wearing them anymore. Your thoughts on weightlifting belts, and I guess in what situations they should or have to be used?
Yeah. Weightlifting belts really should be used when your body is when your back is in a compromised position, meaning that where it can get hurt. So it's a safety tool. You don't need to wear it all. I never wore a belt unless I was doing something where I was in a leaning over position, like bent rows, one arm rows. Anytime my back was kind of like vulnerable to injury. Squatting, okay, always wore a belt. But if I'm sitting on a leg press machine when my back is supported by the machine, I don't need the belt. Matter of fact, a belt, I don't know how people leg press with a belt, because the belt is digging into your gut. Anytime you need to increase intra-abdominal pressure, where you want to contract against the belt, that's going to help you and give you more strength. Okay? So that's when I would wear it. If I would do barbell bicep curls, which I hated, but if I would do those, I'd wear my belt because I didn't want to, tweak my back. That's what it's used for. It's for protection. It's not something that you need to wear all the time. But likewise, squatting without a belt is very dangerous. People say, you're not squatting to increase your core strength. Your abdominal and lower back strength. You're squatting to increase your leg size, okay? When you're doing hyperextensions, okay, on a hyperextension machine, or you're doing abs, doing crunches and stuff like that, and leg lifts, that's when you're training your core, okay? Your core is going to get indirectly stimulated even with a belt on. So you're not weakening your core, you're protecting your core so you don't throw your back out and wind up in the hospital with some ruptured discs. And that's the importance of a belt. And you should always have a belt that fits well, okay? If it's not comfortable, okay, and it's digging into your side, because I have a short torso, so I couldn't wear one of those thick powerlifting belts. They would be killing me. But guys that have long torsos, they can wear those belts because their rib cage is up higher, so they don't have that problem. So you have to find a belt that works well for you, and just experiment. Go to the store, try them on, see which one you like. I always liked those belts that were thicker in the back with the little bubble they had back there to kind of give you a little back support, and then they got thinner in the front where they attached in front of here so they wouldn't dig into my abdominal region. But everyone else is different. Some people like those thick ones to go all the way around. You have to experiment with the belt to see if you like. And you might have to buy a few belts before you figure out which one works best for you. They all come very stiff though, so you have to really, it's going to take you like a month or two to break it in a little bit, just like a baseball mitt. Baseball mitt, when you get it, if you guys ever throw a baseball around, they're very stiff, the leather. But once you break them in a little bit and they move around a little bit, it's a lot easier, to work with it. Once the belt gets a little softer, you're going to love it.
Take one more question. Just like last week, we have a lot of questions that we were not able to get to. What we'll do is we'll package some of these questions that were not used, some of the ones from last week as well. We'll send them to Dave. Dave will select the best ones and make individual videos. But again, second week in a row that we've gotten all these questions. So we are very appreciative of your contributions to the show. Again, this is what we do. I mean, this is what the purpose of the show is. I mean, you have all these different questions relating to bodybuilding, related to health, training, supplementation, and this is the forum to ask those questions. So again, appreciate your contributions. And for those that didn't get asked, I'm going to send it to Dave, and then we'll take it from there. Last one. People love asking this specific angle about your career. Like, what did you take? How much did you take? So this question is specific to your injection volume during your peak. Were you injecting daily? If you want to just give the breakdown as far as at your absolute peak, 300-pound mass monster, how often were you injecting?
People will be disappointed by this answer because it's going to sound too commonplace now in today's world with all the amounts of shit people take. But back when I was taking this in the 90s, in the early 2000s, this was a lot. This was a people thought this was a high dose, and it was just what I found what worked, which was the minimum effective dose that gave me the maximum benefit. So I used 1,000 milligrams of like some sort of testosterone every week, and I usually broke it into 3 shots. I didn't do daily injections; it was too much of a pain in the neck. Off season, I would usually use something like Equipoise or Deca, sometimes both of them. Usually, and usually back then, we weren't using as much as I even quality. We would use like 300 milligrams of Equipoise. We would do like 400 milligrams of Deca with that. A lot of times I would try to do like 4 to 6 weeks of Dianabol, like maybe 25 to 30 milligrams per day. As long as I didn't hurt my appetite too much. I couldn't do any Anadrol with that. It would kill my appetite. And then I would do some growth hormone with that. And usually, like I said, I know people don't believe it, but the GH was really good back then. It was usually Humatrope. And we were using 3 IUs a day. And you know what the truth was? It was really, we couldn't afford to use anymore. At one point, I had gotten a really good overseas connection. And I think we were using Norditropin, which was really good. It was like a German GH that was it was very expensive, but it was also really good. I liked that. The Genotropin pens were really good too back then, and that was coming from Europe. And then the Serostim came in kind of in the end, like the early 2000s. That was like a big thing, and those were awesome too. Those came from the AIDS patients, So, but I never really did more than 3 IUs. Sometimes I'd go up to 4 IUs if I hurt myself or something like that. But I noticed I would get a lot of swelling. The side effects started over 4 IUs, so I never went over 4 IUs. And, of course, I experimented a day or two. Let's see what 5 or 6 IUs feel like. And I'd feel like, oh, I feel terrible. I'm too swelled up. My fingers are hurting me and everything like that. So I wouldn't do it. But that, no one was doing that kind of those numbers back then. So that was even extreme. So like I felt like I was almost like I felt guilty doing that. But I knew it worked for my body, and I knew I wasn't overdoing it for me, because if I tried 1,200 or 1,400 milligrams of testosterone a week, I felt crappy. If I took, I'd have the flu. I'd get like the steroid flu. Like my body didn't need a lot. Likewise, if I took Anadrols, I can never get through more than like 7 days of it because I couldn't eat. I literally couldn't eat. I was drinking like a million shakes a day. I'm like, this is ridiculous. I'm like, how am I going to grow if I can't eat? So I don't know how people eat on the stuff, but Jimmy the Bull used to take like 3 to 5 of them a day, but he used to eat hot dogs all day long. So, so maybe it doesn't matter for him, but as far as for bodybuilding purposes, that just didn't work for me. And that was the regimen, and off season, at some point I started using insulin. We were using, at the time, it was Humulin R was available at like the pharmacies without a prescription. And we were using like 10 IUs in the morning. And then I would use 8 IUs about 5 to 6 hours later in 2 shots, because I knew we didn't test blood sugar then because you couldn't get a blood sugar monitor. It was too expensive and they didn't have them readily available like they do nowadays. It's $10. You can get one at Walmart. So I just knew how my body processed. I was eating all this food. I wasn't gaining any weight. I'm like, you know what? There's no way I'm absorbing all this food. So when I started adding insulin, and that's when Milos and I kind of went on that trip. I met him in Dubai. I mean, we just happened to be on the same trip. And we started talking and comparing notes. And that's when he's like, yeah, I started trying Humulin R too. And we both were doing it independently. And we were kind of doing it the same way at the time. And it was working, you know. And I said to him, I said, all of a sudden I started gaining weight when I started using this stuff. And that was probably that was like this typical cycle I would do, something like that. Pre-contest, I would do testosterone. I would do, at the time we had Parabolin. There was no Trembolone. It was like Parabolin. I do 3 amps of that. So it was 76 milligrams per amp. I would do Winstrol, 50 milligrams every other day, injectable. And a lot of times I throw some Primobolan in if I had it. We'd only do 200 milligrams a week of that. I don't know. That was just what everyone did. I don't know why we did 200 and we did more of everything else. But so it would be usually testosterone, Winstrol, Primobolan, and we would do halotest in the last 2 weeks because the Parabolin was like kind of a longer acting compound. It wasn't Trembolone acetate, so we felt that the halotestin definitely helped the last 2 weeks with a little bit of hardness, although it made you really, really nasty. And then I'd use clenbuterol. I never really used a lot because I really had a good metabolism. I'd maybe take 20 micrograms 3 times a day or something like that. And that was typical. And then I'd use like 2 or 3 IUs of GH when I dieted. I found if I used less, I looked better. A lot of times it would bloat my stomach out if I used more of it. So I didn't want to do that pre-contest. And that was it. And it was just consistently applying that, never missing meals, never missing workouts, sleeping 9 to 10 hours a day. If I had to take a nap, I would take a nap. And I consistently repeated everything. And I bet if you sat down and you questioned guys like Nick Walker and Derek Lunsford and people who've had like consistently good results and they've grown every year, Sean Clarita, they'll tell you the same thing. You'll be like bored by what their cycle was. You'll be like, yeah, you know what? It's a bunch of stuff, but it's nothing like excessive because it's the hard work they're doing. It's the training, it's the eating, and it's consistently repeating that day after day after day, never missing. It didn't matter if it was Thanksgiving or Christmas. I never missed a meal. And that's the most important thing. It's consistently applying the same principles over and over and over again, knowing that you're going to keep improving incrementally day by day by day. It might be very small incremental amounts, but it's going to happen. If you mess up 1-2 days a week, you blew the whole week. And I knew that. And so I never would allow myself to blow the whole week. And that's why I got really good results. I maximized my body's potential. Okay. If I had the structure to be Mr. Olympia, I would have been competing for the Olympia title because I had the mindset to do it. I just didn't have the genetic tools to do it. I got as far as I can go. I feel good that I was one of the first few guys to ever be, a lean 300 pounds, back in the 90s, probably Dorian being the first. And so to me that, I accomplished something that no one had done before. And so I felt good about that. And obviously, I was able to do a lot of guest posings and seminars, and I lived the bodybuilding lifestyle, which is the dream of every guy who starts working out, to live that bodybuilding lifestyle. And I did it. So, but that's 100% the truth. There's nothing. Did I try other weird shit along the way? Yeah, I tried that PGL, product, that prostaglandin product. All it did was make me nauseous. I never really used that. I did do some IGF. I've told those stories before, and I found that less works better. And I don't have to repeat that. I forgot to throw that in. That was more later into the 90s. And that's about it. There was, at some point there was a Nubane phase where I was addicted to Nubane for like a year or two, which I'm not proud of, but I got into that. That obviously probably didn't help my bodybuilding, but aside from that, there wasn't any magical drugs that we did. We realized that applying consistency is the most important thing. And the good thing about that era was that the drugs were real. There were fakes around there, but we found the good supplies of what we needed. A lot of it came from Europe. Mexico was also pretty good if you got the right stuff and the right connections. And then there was, for a while, and Valentino tells this story, there was a great supply of American stuff for about 3 or 4 years that Valentino was hooked into there, and everyone was getting all the Steris stuff right from a U.S. pharmacy. I don't know how they were doing it, but they were getting DECA and all the different testosterones and HCG and the stuff was really good quality. And so luckily, I think during that era, and maybe that's why the physiques were better, because the drugs were better. It's possible. Nowadays everyone's using underground stuff, and so no one really knows what's good and what's not. I mean, you could test them with the Roy test kits that I sell, but at the end of the day, no one really knows the quality of what they're using.
That's going to do for this episode. Before we go, reminder right now at speciesnutrition.com, post-workout sale. So CARBOLYZE Unflavored, $19.99. Chocolate peanut butter ISOLYZE, 22 servings, $19.99. So both products available for over 50% off. You're getting your post-workout nutrition for $40. In addition to that, 25% off across the board at speciesnutrition.com using promo code PW25, post-workout 25. So PW25, 25% off. And again, chocolate peanut butter ISOLYZE, CARBOLYZE Unflavored, marked down $19.99 each. You're the first ones to know about it. It's live at speciesnutrition.com. For Dave Palumbo, I'm Sadiq Faruqi. We'll see you next week.